I'd like to thank Professor Chen and the university for allowing us to come here, and for all of you for listening to our message. With God's help, you're aspiring, and God's help will achieve high positions, places that you'll be able to accomplish with knowledge, to bring peace to the world, to bring justice and good. So God should help in the future. In the near future, you should all be able to rise and be able to accomplish all these great, lofty, which I'm sure is the aspirations, what you're hoping for. But in our issue, I hope this is one of the issues that you will be working on. And with God's help, maybe with the Almighty's power, the issue will be solved even today, because anything can happen with the Almighty's power, and things in the day, everything can change. But I'm here with God's help, as I was so eloquently introduced, that we deal with the issue of the conflict in Palestine, in the Holy Land, and the given in the world is that this is a religious conflict. Almost throughout the world, people will define what is happening in the Holy Land as between Jews and Muslims, Jews and Arabs, and that's the way it is understood. There could be some nuances, differences, but this is basically the way it is explained, what is happening there, and therefore the solutions are constantly, through that perspective, they look for a solution. And in truth, there could be nothing further from the truth from this issue. It is not a religious conflict. It has nothing whatsoever to do with religion. It has nothing to do with coexistence of Jews and Muslims, Jews and Arabs. Anywhere in the world, and certainly not in Palestine, we were living hundreds of years. History attests to that, and not even such a distant history. For hundreds of years, we've been living together. One of my colleagues who came with me, Rabbi Rosenberg, is 8 generations Palestinian. In other words, prior to any human rights groups, any international courts to protect or anything that's necessary, anything like that, when anything could have been done to anybody, the Jewish community was enjoying a friendship and coexisting with the Muslims, with the Christian Arabs in Palestine, and altogether in all the Muslim countries, Jews lived, coexisted in these lands and flourished as practicing extremely religious, God-fearing communities that upheld all the laws of the Torah, dressed as Jews have to dress. They lived in all these lands. I personally can do bear testimony a little to that. I went maybe 25 years ago to Yemen. We have my colleagues go every single year, already for 40 years, we go to Yemen. Everybody carried guns, everybody carries knives in Yemen at that time. It was in the hills of Yemen. And the Jews don't carry arms, and the Jewish people were living in these communities, and while I was there was a tribal war going on, so there was blocks, roadblocks, garbage cans in the road. They would stop our cars as we're going through, and they would look and they would say, Yehud, a Jew. They let us through because we weren't involved in their conflict. They would just simply let us through, and they were like brothers there. And there's a time of, it's so precious, I can't even get into the anecdotes, all the different how to show how friendly they were one to the other, and they considered themselves like brothers. That said, of course, we definitely had a distinct, different religion. We were very similar in our practices. We believe in one God and so forth, but we definitely are different religion. And there definitely was times that there were some bumps in the road, and that there were, and that in Muslim countries they have certain laws that pertain that the Muslims have certain rights and others don't. But that does not mean that we weren't able to flourish in these lands. It doesn't mean that that these lands didn't provide for us a gracious home, a friendship, and a safe haven when we were being persecuted throughout Europe, throughout these hundreds of years, when it was whether the Crusades or the Inquisition or the Blood Bibles, whatever, Jewish people found a home. And even by the Second World War, mind you, Jewish people were able to go to the Muslim countries. So basically, the portrayal that there is a religious conflict, and the problem here in the Holy Land has to do because of this religion, because of Islam and Judaism, that's patently false. That's false. Because if it would have been like that, then it should have been much worse prior to the United Nations. Now, So what is the issue here? The issue is that Judaism is thousands of years old. Judaism means one thing and one thing only, that the Jewish people made a covenant with the Almighty to be subservient to God, to keep the Torah. That is what it means, Judaism. Yes, we have our forefathers, we came from Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and there's such a concept of a convert to Judaism. What the Judaism is the practice of is the practicing the religion. Just because somebody's born from a Jewish mother doesn't mean he's practicing the Jewish religion. Jewish religion is one thing and one thing, only subservience to God. Zionism is a transformation. Zionism is taking this concept of Judaism and transforming it to a base material concept of nationalism. We should have a piece of land. We should have a military, an Olympic team, and so forth. And we should be compared to other nations. It's totally taking God out of the equation, out of the essence. They're proud to say that they're a democracy. You don't have to practice the religion. So really, in its essence, it contradicts itself constantly. It's full of contradictions in what they are. You call it the Jewish state, you say that it's only right that the Jews should have a land. Are you a democracy or are you a religion? Make up your mind what you are. And so it's full of contradictions. We could get into the nuances how that works. But again, I'm just trying to really, just because you're students, and with God's help, I just want to shed a little light, give you what to study with God's help to see further into these subjects. So again, Judaism is thousands of years, and this is what we accepted, to be subservient to God. And Zionism started around 100-odd years ago by the Herzl, who came up with this concept of Zionism. What Zionism means, Zion is Zion, pronounced in Hebrew. It means the city of David, Jerusalem, basically. And they call themselves Zionists. It came about because they decided to have a national home, and they decided to pick Palestine. Now, really, the Zionists didn't want Palestine. Because they were totally severed, you could say, from the connection to God. As again, I'll quote just a few quotes of this, but basically, they were looking for something, a materialistic out. They wanted to estrange themselves from the religion. They detested the religion. Theodor Herzl wrote in a newspaper, and I'll give you the quotes, and you can follow the quotes. Even if you don't mark it down, I'll tell you where to go, tell a site. But basically, the Herzl announced that he's not going to circumcise his son. Now, if anybody knows what Judaism, this is one of our really, because we consider this the symbol that we make let's say, like a tattoo, a sign on us that we are connected to God, that we are subservient to God, and that's circumcision. And Jewish people throughout history, till recently, they gave their lives, whether it was the USSR, Jews gave their lives be able to do circumcision. And there were sometimes decrees on the Jews that they're punishable by death if they'll do circumcision, and they did it anyway. Because this we understood as our connection, our symbol to be with God. Theodor Herzl wrote, he had one son, his name was Hans, and he wrote in the newspaper that he's not circumcising his son. Until the day of his death, he didn't circumcise his son. So what did he want? What did he have this Jewish state? He could have just assimilated, but something was driving them. A thing that was spiritual, we say the same thing, the spiritual concept was driving them. Not when I say we, if you ever heard Rabbi Soloveitchik, like modern Yeshiva University was their principal was Soloveitchik, his grandfather, basically, which was the Ivy League of Jewish study, Rabbi Chaim Soloveitchik, blessed memory. He said they didn't create a state. He said, and then sort of try to rip Jews away from God. The whole thing that was driving them was to create this concept, this Judaism, to uproot the Jews from the Almighty, because they could have just assimilated and moved away. Why did they have to insist on making something when they didn't want the religion? Jabotinsky, another leader, Zev Jabotinsky, was the mentor of Begin, one of the fathers of Zionism. The Herzl Jabotinsky wrote in an article, again, we have it brought here, he wrote in a newspaper called Chadashas Haaretz, a newspaper in 1919. Remember, the state was created, was ratified in 1948. So this is way back at the beginning when the Zionist waves were coming. And he wrote in an article called The News of the Land, that's the translation of Chadashas Haaretz. He wrote, in the national home, we will announce that those Jews who have on themselves the rust of exile and they refuse to shave off their beards and payos, earlocks, will be second-class citizens and will not have the right to vote. In other words, this is the Jewish state that they're trying to make, that they're going to do. Not when you have a democracy in America or any place else. Imagine that they openly say that Jews, and they didn't write anything out, Muslims have to act, or Christians, but the Jews who have the rust of, in other words, of Judaism on them, they won't have a right to vote. This is what they want. They want the national vote. So why did they go to pick Palestine at all to make their home? Simply for convenience sake, because to make a country, as anybody who understands this basic logic, you need a tremendous amount of money and backing and support. So they knew that if they were thinking of Uganda or other places, if they're going to make their country in some productive land, they won't be able to convince the masses of Jews and evangelistic Christians to support them. So they changed their plans, which they hadn't spoken about. They decided to make their home, this national homeland, in Palestine. And they decided to add on to this, really like fuse together Jewish principles and Jewish things. Not that they wanted this Jewish thing, but simply to give it a facade of religion, a facade of godliness, and that they should be able to have a document to back them. What document do they need? A powerful document called the Torah. They'll be able to go to the evangelistic Christians and say, see, we have a deed to the land. In the Torah, it says that God gave us the land. Way back when, we have the right to the land, and anybody who's coming now claims they have a right to, for instance, the Palestinian people, so they have to prove themselves, because they have the deed to the land from way back. So they decided to make a Star of David as their symbol, call it the state of Israel. Israel is the name of Jacob in the Bible. And they even grew beards, mind you, and went to Yemen and to Morocco and to other lands and told these people that we are the beginning of God's redemption. So let me just explain what the concept of what Judaism has of exile and redemption. You should just understand where we're coming from as Jews. We believe that when we accepted this the yoke of the Torah, the subservience to God, this covenant with God, that God required on Mount Sinai some 3,000 years ago. We were required. God told us that we have to go into the Holy Land, and when and there we'll be able to, it's like His garden, and we should practice as many laws that are only pertain to the Holy Land. That you have to give a tenth of the grows on the ground. You have to give to charity. There's many things that pertain only to fruits that grow on the Holy Land, and so forth. We had to go there, but it was stipulated with us that God warns us many times in the 5 books of Moses in the Bible. It says God warns us: do not profane the land, do not desecrate the land, that the land should not reject you as it has the nations prior to you. Basically, we were told, you're going to the Holy Land, but you have to be on a very high level of holiness. If not, you will be sent into exile. Now, the Jewish people have a lot of prophets, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Isaiah. All these books speak about how we were warned by the prophets that God tells us we're going to be sent into exile. There was a destruction of the temple, and this was the end result, that we weren't on this proper level of holiness, and we were sent into exile. Every Jewish person knew, and it's in our prayer books, every Jewish person who's true to the Torah says, because of our sins, we were sent out of the land. Not because we were physically weak. We didn't say because the Greeks and the Romans happened to be victorious over us, we were sent. We were lacking in serving God, so God has us driven out of the land. The messengers were the Greeks and the Romans. Not that they won't be punished, that's a whole other concept. But the fact of the matter is the Jews were driven from the land because of our sins. And we accepted that this issue of exile for 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple is nothing to do with a physical issue of weakness, and therefore if we'll buy Uzis and phantom flies and the drones will be able to go back and take over the land. No, it has nothing to do with this. It has to do with we were close to God, we were driven from the table of God, and now we pray and ask God for one day that He will ultimately reveal His glory throughout the world. All humanity will believe in God, we believe will be a miracle of change, and that all humanity will go up and serve God in peace. The Jewish people, if you look at our prayer books around the world, we have one issue that we should bring glorification to God's name. That's what our life is about. The pinnacle of this is when God will make this miracle, where all humanity will recognize God. Then we will return. So it won't be that we're going to one day come along and say, okay, now I changed my mind, I don't agree with this, but one day I'm going to come here and you give me the land because I'm telling you, you should give me the land. We believe there will be a miracle of all humanity. There won't be any concept of atheism. Everybody will believe in God and we will all go up, all nations will, in harmony, serve God. Till that day comes, we have to be patient and live in every land where we're residing and be loyal citizens in every land we're residing and not attempt to return. We were put under oath. When we were driven into exile 2,000 years ago, we were put under oath by God, and that's the prophecy of King Solomon, and this is a basic of Jewish belief. We were put under oath, 3 oaths. One, that we should not return en masse in large numbers to the Holy Land. Secondly, we should not rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country we're residing. Thirdly, not to make any attempt to end exile. That is why for 2,000 years, it was the golden age of Judaism. Jews had rich communities. Jews went through terrible trials and tribulations, yet they never went and bought a piece of land and made their own state. Regardless, not even in Palestine or any other place. Why? Because this is a given, this is part of the basics of Judaism, that we understand that we're undergoing a treatment. We're in a medical care. God is giving us this bitter medicine, but it's from God. So the medicine is exile. And Rabbi Shamshon Hirsch, she's the head of German Jewry, which like sort of modern, whatever, but the German Jewry. He wrote that God is perfect. He has in medicine of let's say a king punishes somebody, hangs somebody. What happens is the family suffers, but that's not the king can't do anything about it. This guy needed to get punished. God is perfect. So when God punishes us, or anybody, each person that is affected is exacting according to the way God wills, and so he says there was 2 purposes in our being dispersed amongst the nations. One, that to break our haughtiness, so we should be worthy of returning. Secondly, we should be dispersed, and ideally, if we would be serving God properly, we should be a light unto the nations. That means for the people of the book, we're supposed to emulate God, just as God is compassionate. We should be compassionate. So if we're properly serving God, we should be as teachers to the world. That's the Jewish perspective. So therefore we know, and the rabbis were asked throughout these hundreds of years of exile, should we buy a piece of land? Sometimes people came and they said, look, we're suffering here, maybe we should buy a piece of land, make our own country. And the rabbis said, patience, patience. You can't do that. When God wills it, God is full of compassion. When he sees the time is right, it will happen in a second, in a blink of an eye. But till that day comes, just serve God, and that's what God wants. Keep the Torah, keep Sabbath, kosher, family purity, whatever you have to do, keep the law. That is what Jews did. All of a sudden, Zionism came along. Theodor Herzl, some 100-odd years ago, yeah, and he says, oh, he's our Savior. He's going to bring us this great, the beginning of redemption. And it's so ridiculous because if there was anybody who would want to redemption, if it has to do with redemption and the will of God, it would be the rabbis. It would be the holy men. It wouldn't be this guy who openly announces that he's not going to circumcise his son. So you see the duplicity, you see the hypocrisy in what we're dealing here. One side, on one hand, they're talking about democracy, about he's making a state. The other side, they put this emotional music every time you hear on occasion to the Zionists, that they have the music that the land that God gave us thousands of years ago, we're returning to our home. It's full of hypocrisy and falsehood. Basically, you have Judaism is religion, Zionism is a transformation to nationalism, and it's expressly forbidden as for a Jewish people, we are under oath, not to return en masse, not to rebel against any nation. We have to be loyal citizens in every country residing. To compound the terrible sin, the crime of Zionism, if they would have made this country in a desolate land, in an uninhabited land, we as Jewish people, religious people, would stand in total opposition because it's rebelling against the concept that God is the ruler of the world and he forbade us to make a state. So Jewish people, universally, we have a book called The Rabbis Speak Out, before it affected the Palestinian people, 130 years, all the leaders prior to the Second World War stood in opposition to even 1 inch of Jewish sovereignty. You will never accept it. But it's compounded, this crime, because the Torah tells us you're not allowed to kill and you're not allowed to steal. So when they decided to go to Palestine, and now they're uprooting the Palestinian people and doing what they're doing to the Palestinian people, they're basically breaching all the laws of the Torah. Says you're not allowed to kill, you're not allowed to steal, and so forth. And we have to add that the Jewish requirement is that when somebody does something good to you, you have to show your gratitude. It's a requirement. Now, we lived in Muslim lands. We found a safe haven in these Muslim lands. We lived in Palestine. And we're required to show our gratitude. Now, to repay them by condemning them and vilifying them and saying that the Arabs and the Muslims have an ingrained hate for Jews, that is so despicable, because it's instead of paying back good, it's punishing them, labeling them, and causing that the world should look with it at them as evil as the Palestinian, Muslim people and Arab people with an evil, with a perspective as if they're villains and that they don't accept other people. So we oppose this. We've opposed it every day. And 2 minutes, I will finish with my just 1 minute. We have the Jewish world still today, around the world, stand up. We have tens of thousands of people who demonstrate, who stand up. Invariably, the more the religious community, the more anti-Zionist, because they understand that it's totally incompatible. And the reason you don't hear it is because the terrible intimidation, the power, they're efficient Zionists, and anybody speaks up, they condemn as anti-Semitic, which is their ploy. They beat and imprisoned Jews in Palestine who speak up against them. And even in America, if somebody speaks up, we get around. I was supposed to speak in a mosque. I spoke Thursday night in a mosque. But the ADL called up the mosque and said they'll take away they'll seek to lose their status of a non-profit. They threaten them. They threaten every Jew. So people don't stand up because they're fearful. In New York, thank God, we have tens of thousands of Jews who still stand up, and invariably, the more religious you are, they oppose Zionism. And just one word. The chief rabbi of Palestine in 1948 pleaded with the United Nations. He said, our community, because the Zionists came from Europe, they were given it to Britain, gave them the state. But he said, I am the leader of the community. We do not want the Jewish state in Palestine. And they were totally ignored because the British, they worked together with the Weizmen and the heads of Zionism. They created the state against the will of the indigenous Palestinian Jews as a whole. So basically you have a state it's a political movement, it's a national political movement that's flawed, selfish and flawed in its essence, and it's only incorporating and using the religion to be able to intimidate and to call this a religious conflict and to condemn people as self-hating. Jews are anti-Semitic. You should know the difference. So now you're ready to go up and do, because if you understand what it is, then you can, and stand up. We've lived together for hundreds of years. You can stand up and tell the world the solution, just like a doctor, if he knows a sickness, he can give a remedy. If you can differentiate the two, then you can work on a solution that we could live together by just removing the impediment to peace. We say, God help peacefully and speedily the state of Israel, which is the impediment to peace. We can once again live in peace and harmony. Thank you.
Basically, you're saying that Israel should exist, but not as a Jewish state, not specific as more of a democracy.
No, it should be a Palestinian state. As we said, a Jew is required to accept and be a loyal citizen. So it should be first of all, the vast majority of the people living in Palestine were Muslim. Then there was a Christian community. Then there was a small Jew. So it should be the will of the people. And as a Jew, we have a double requirement, not only to be loyal citizens, but not to have our state. So we should be loyal citizens in the type of country, the way they want to set up the country, and then we would be loyal citizens of that country. That is what we want. Totally not a Jewish state.
Yeah. So if the oath that you're mentioning is in the Torah.
I'm sorry, the oath? Yes. It's a Shir HaShirim. It's called the Song of Songs from King Solomon. It's explained in the Talmud. Anybody who's religious, a Jew, will tell you that it's impossible not to accept the Talmud. It's because there's the written law of the 5 books of Moses, and then orally, the 5 books of Moses gives some commandments, but it's sometimes one sentence. It doesn't explain how to do that commandment. You have to have the explanation, which was orally given to Moses, which was later written in the form of the Talmud. And the Talmud explains this prophecy of King Solomon, and there was no question this was accepted for 2,000 years. All the leaders of Judaism, this is a clear command of God, the oath of God, not to return to mass, not to rebel against nations.
So what is their, how can they deny that then?
How they can deny it? In the same Talmud, it says, in the Torah it says you're not allowed to eat pig, and everybody knows that. It says you're not allowed to eat a worm. You're not allowed to eat worms, but there's 5 commandments against eating worm. The Talmud says that there's 150 ways to prove prove that you can eat a worm, even though it's clearly not allowed to eat it. Why? Because any lawyer will tell you, with enough money, you can get a lawyer who will be able to tell you that right now it's in the middle of the summer and it's in the middle of the night. And so they found like a loophole, a clause, because there's an oath that says God put on the oath. And I'll just give you one example of what they say. They say there's an oath that the nations should not oppress us in our exile too much. God spoke to the other nations, I don't to the Jewish people. So they said, being that the other nations are oppressing the Jews so much, so it negates these oaths, and it's not really applicable anymore. Things like that. So it's and then they hired great rabbis. One of them just died just recently. If you heard about it, they hired these knowledgeable rabbis who, unfortunately, they're very knowledgeable, but that doesn't mean that they're going in the right ways. And these people give the rights to cut down Arab trees and all these things, and they sign off on all these things. So the fact says, oh well, you see, the great rabbi said like that. But if you go to the religious communities around it, invariably the more religious in every branch, Lithuanian, Hasidic, Sephardic, everybody you'll see that they stand in opposition to Zionism. They're very religious.
Rabbi, on Thursday night you mentioned what might be a good use. People in this room may not know that Israel, the state of Israel, is the largest recipient of U.S. foreign aid on the planet, and to the tune of about $5 billion a year. And you mentioned what might be a good use of that money.
Well, yes. I mean, everybody knows that they're creating this great wall. They're creating all these different things that they're using ammunition, like the field day of this, that they're able to practice all these different arms, they're able to test them and so forth. So you have their lobbying forces. They would love that this continues because it gives a chance to have the most advanced ways of testing all the drones and everything else. But in truth, if you take these billions of dollars and you would, like I said, if you understand clearly the problem that there was Jews living together with Muslims and Christians. Now, you put in something, a new neighbor to the block called Zionism. And you keep on forcing the issue that this has to stay because you're making it you're fusing it together with Judaism, so you don't want to eradicate one religion. But if you understood that you need a surgical way of removing, God help without removing this new neighbor that's simply a flawed political movement, so let us understand. Then you would approach it differently, and just like South Africa, you were able to get rid of apartheid, it doesn't mean removing blacks and whites. If you would take billions of dollars and say, look, we have the Jews go to profusely apologize to the Palestinian leadership. Then you see, it's nothing done randomly. It's under leadership. And I've met with each individually, Hezbollah, Hamas, and all the ones, Muslim Brotherhood, and so forth. They will tell you that they have nothing against Jews. I met with Sheikh Karadawi, and it's open, and we do everything open. It's all above. And I went to Gaza, we met the Prime Minister, and they said, we don't have anything against Jews. They said this in a public press conference. What they want is simply their freedom. They want their rights. So if you would profusely apologize them, provide them compensation, restitution for everything, and that they should be able to return to the land, and we'll sit down and try to work out, they will definitely issue a fatwa that they should not kill Jews, and there should be a way of resettling. Now there's Jews who will feel endangered because they committed crimes, they committed interrogation. So it will cost billions of dollars to have these Jews moved, the ones who feel unsafe, to move to Canada, the United States, and so forth. So consider, it will cost $5 billion, $10 billion, how many billions dollars? But every year, with an end, no light at the end of the road, to how much money you have to give for the arms buildup, and because it's never a stop. If you will take this money and just, people want to move away, because you're talking about saying it's only the safety issue, so you can move to some other place, and to be able to, a life of living together without the concept that's called the Jewish state, which is a flawed concept, and it doesn't even make sense, because in a couple of 50 years from now, whatever the issue is, the majority of people will not be Jewish anyway, so why do you dare ask them to say, I pledge allegiance to the state to a Jewish state? Why? But that's something we love to get into. That's a political issue. But the fact is, remove this impediment to peace and use the money to resettle, to be able to work out. It could be done. But if you're thinking in a totally different channel, how could you even start?
And
Thank you. God bless you.